It's all about business. It's all about survival. And in this new world of college football, the ACC, much like the Pac-12, doesn't cut it. Welcome in, everyone, to the Voice of College Football. Breaking news here concerning Clemson and the ACC, very much taking the same path as Florida State. So we will read the articles, and as we always do, we will respond and react. We have a litany of Florida State-related material going down this same path. Check it out on the Florida State channel, also on the main channel as well. And yes, we were all expecting Clemson to follow suit, pardon the pun, next. Appreciate you being here, everyone. We've got Jordan Bowman on the line. Catch Jordan and Tiger Paw Craven every Thursday night at 7 o'clock Eastern Time right here on the Clemson channel. All right, Clemson files lawsuit against ACC over exorbitant exit fees. This coming from the article of Pete Thamel, ESPN, released just about an hour ago. In a significant move that could continue to alter the rapidly shifting landscape of college football, college sports, Clemson filed a lawsuit against the ACC on Tuesday that portends its exit from the league. And in many ways, if you look through this, in terms of the quotes that were pulled by Mr. Thamel here, that Clemson, despite Florida State being the most egregious, the most vocal, the most active, the most aggressive, that Clemson is a little bit more harsh in its statements about the ACC here. In a filing in the Court of Common Pleas in Pickens County, South Carolina, Clemson calls into question both the ACC's grant of rights and exit fees, calling the withdrawal penalty unconscionable and unenforceable. It also calls the ACC's view that the league's grant of media rights would allow the league to own Clemson's media rights after it left the league a, quote, nonsensical reading, quote, wrong, and, quote, inconsistent with the plain language of that agreement. I've got some thoughts about that we'll get to in just a second. Clemson asks in the suit for a declaration that the ACC would not own the rights to Clemson's games, quote, after Clemson ceases to be a member of the ACC, end quote. Clemson also wants the ACC exit fee, 3 times the ACC operating budget, an estimated $140 million. So that's the grant of rights exit fee that does not include the TV rights portion of it. Clemson wants this ruled as an unenforceable penalty in violation of public policy. The Florida State lawsuit had stated that their exit fee with the rights, the media rights included, was $572 million. We know that the ACC was never going to get that much money out of anyone. The lawsuit is the second one filed against the ACC in recent months, as Florida State filed it in late December. The Clemson suit is significant because it indicates that the league's 2 clear-cut football powers and only college football playoff participants who play annually both want to leave the league. The ACC preemptively filed against Florida State in Mecklenburg County, and the sides are haggling over the venue, whether that be North Carolina or in Florida. The suit comes on the same day that the college football playoff is expected to announce a deal with ESPN that has been public and outlined, and we've addressed it here, that further amplifies the financial gap between the Big Ten and the SEC and the rest of college sports. Annually, each Big Ten and SEC team is expected to earn more than $21 million under the new CFP agreement, which starts in 2026. ACC teams are expected to earn more than $13 million. So that's about 40% more. That's an $8 million gap per school, or 8 times 14 is $112 million gap between the two entities, SEC, Big Ten, ACC, Big 12, 112 million per conference per year. So if you got a 10-year window you're looking at, or what we've got here is 2026 through 2031, it was a 7-year contract that is going to be released. You're looking at $100+ million. So listen to this. During the playoff agreement that is going to be announced sometime today, most likely, that we already have the figures on, basically, that's a 7-year deal from 2026 through 2031. If I'm doing the math, maybe it's a 6-year deal, 2026 through 31. Got it. 6 years. There's a disparity between Big 10 SEC, ACC Big 12 of $8 million per team. That's $112 million for the conference over 6 years. That's almost $800 million. The playoff is going to pay the Big 10 and the SEC over the next 6 years, once the new contract kicks in 26, $800 million more to the SEC and the Big 10 than the ACC and the Big 12. So when you start to extrapolate more than just saying, okay, it's 21 million, it's 13 million. Yeah, that's a gap, but it's 21 million and it's 13 million. No, it's $800 million. And that's the postseason difference. We, of course, have known for years and have talked about exhaustively over the last year or two about the gap between the leagues in terms of regular season media income. Which is somewhere in the $40 million per school range. So 40 million times, again, 14 schools. So that's $550 million on top of the gap that we just outlined with the playoff. Excuse me. So Clemson makes clear that the current ACC television contract, which lags well behind the upcoming SEC and Big Ten deals, looms as an inhibitor to Clemson competing at the highest level. Clemson took part in 6 college football playoffs from 2015 through 20 and 2 national championships. The ACC's actions interfere with Clemson's free exercise of its rights and are fatally detrimental to Clemson's efforts to ensure that its athletic programs can continue to compete at the highest level, the suit claims, which is critically important to Clemson even beyond athletics. Now, much of the things that we have talked about concerning the Florida State lawsuits and, of course, their end of this battle has been much more public. This is the first big splash by Clemson, where Florida State's been out there for months. And so there's been a lot of discovery of the ACC and its dealings that we can apply, of course, now to Clemson. So everything that we've talked about, everything we've learned about the Florida State battle with the ACC and maybe the questionable dealings by the ACC toward its members going back to around 2010, we can apply all that to Clemson as well. We do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Please, you can call the show if you'd like. We'll take your comments and questions there in the chat as well. Ross Dillinger posted this on X here in the last few minutes. In court documents, Clemson claims that, quote, the ACC did not hold a vote requesting that its members, including Clemson, approve of the lawsuit against Florida State, nor has Clemson ever authorized the ACC's lawsuit against Florida State. So basically what they're saying there is Clemson is saying that the ACC is acting without consorting with its members, schools, without the approval, without counseling with and consulting with its member schools. The ACC is acting on its own. And that's not the way we do business. The way we do business is that we discuss, We take motions, we take actions, we take votes within the ACC's institutional structure. But in this case, you went and you attacked and filed a lawsuit against Florida State without consulting with any of us. And that's not the way you do business. That's not the way conferences have done business athletically, and not the way that they've done business in the ACC. So I think that that's a major statement there that Clemson will be able to take in front of a judge if it comes to that, to say that they have not acted, the ACC has not acted in an honest and forthright fashion. Sport Mark, man, ACC is in a fight for survival. And this is something that's been coming for a long time, because even before Florida State took action, we've talked about it many times on here, going back to the Oklahoma, Texas, and USC, UCLA moves out of their conferences, that basically there's a widening gap of revenue. And it's not as though the ACC has ever been equal to the Big Ten or the SEC in regards to financial compensation. So let's do understand that when we see these figures of $80 to $90 million per team for the SEC and the Big Ten, and then we see the ACC, their deal is escalating by the year, but not much, couple $1 million per school, that they are just crossing the $40 million threshold. So they're roughly half of the Big Ten and the SEC. Let's understand that while the ACC did not cut a good deal with ESPN, their schools don't pull in the eyeballs to justify a deal that's anything close to the Big Ten or the SEC anyway. So Clemson and Florida State have two reasons to be angry and bitter. And one, they really can't blame anyone, not even themselves. It's just the circumstance. One is that the ACC has not been dealing with them in good faith. But they also just play in an inferior league that does not have the attention, and therefore cannot justifiably or in a valid way command the same TV deal, media rights deal as the two major conferences. So it's partly bad deal. It's partly you don't have the football clout, the athletic clout, the brands in this conference, top to bottom, that compare to the other two conferences. So even if the ACC was running a taut ship and a first-rate situation for years and years and years, and its marketing was great and they were doing everything right, they're still dealing with a conference that's full of Syracuse and Wake Forest and Boston College. So Florida State and programs like it, Clemson, they have had to bear the brunt of that. And that's part of it is not the ACC's fault. That is college football in particular spiraling, I don't want to say out of control, because it's not out of control from a financial standpoint. It's a good thing. But it is a situation in which just there are great conferences and then there are these conferences. Yeah, so Roger Dodger says that he believes that the majority of the ACC does not want to dissolve the conference. Correct. It's pretty close, though. They took a vote. What was that motion that vote that was taken? That was split 7-7. It was not an official ACC vote. I'm forgetting, from a few months ago. And it was a bit surprising. A couple teams that sided with the ACC versus, it was the initial vote to bring in SMU, Stanford, and Cal. Yeah, most of these schools don't want the conference to dissolve because even though they're playing in an inferior conference compared to the top two, they're playing in a much better situation and they have a entry into the college football playoff. And even schools that don't have a chance of making the college football playoff have an entry into that financial gain. And most of them do not have a landing spot. Most of them do not have an alternative or an option to go somewhere else. So you're right, Roger Dodger, that the majority of the ACC could stay together, but in what form or fashion with what level of relevance? When something starts to fall apart, it then crumbles quickly because the stronger parts leave, and then the next layer uh, understands the diminished state of the situation of the conference and they leave. This is almost what happened to the Big 12, but the Big 12 was saved by its mediocrity, that nobody else wanted the Big 12, and the Big 12 made the move that myself and others thought it should make in grabbing the four best options in the group of five to solidify and stabilize their situation. So there was a time there. We forget about it now because the Big 12's safe, supposedly. I believe it is for the time being, but things change so quickly that may be an outdated statement in 2 years. But when there was a thought and there was talk about Oklahoma State possibly running and Kansas having an option because of its basketball prowess and other schools, that it could have crumbled. So once Florida State and Clemson leave and find another partner, which is going to be easy for them, North Carolina. So then the other schools that know that they have an opportunity, that they're attractive to other leagues, they don't want to be in this awful situation. They don't want to be at a financial and competitive disadvantage as well. So that next layer, Miami, North Carolina, and then it becomes somewhat murky and vague as to who and what the power structure is past that. But they don't want to be in a dying ACC. They don't want to be in an inferior conference. But then you're right, Roger Dodger, at a certain place, I don't know exactly where that is. And I don't even know if those schools know exactly who they are. The bottom does. The top and the bottom know who they are. But in the middle somewhere, whether they have enough connections, relationships to know, are we attractive to the Big Ten or the SEC? Or would the Big 12 take us as an option where we would want to go to the other viable conference and make them even more viable? You know, the Big 12 has spread itself from Arizona to Florida anyway. So let's say there's some schools in that in between place that think of themselves as being a player and they're competitive, Louisville, NC State, those kind of schools, but they're not automatic, attractive products to the SEC and the Big Ten, nor do they want to stay in a weakened state, in a diminished state where they're going to be playing Wake Forest in front of 300,000 people on TV on a weekly basis. They believe more of themselves and they want to stay relevant and in big time football. Do they become attractive to the Big 12? Because unless the SEC and Big Ten truly look at this map together as partners to say, we'll take on some territory and some members that may not financially make sense in terms of the exact direct bottom line, the financial numbers that we can draw directly from this deal. Like Fox and ESPN are going to tell us when you take on NC State or you take on Virginia, you're not taking on value. And so you're going to have to split that revenue share again, and it's going to diminish the value that you get in the media rights deal per team. But just having that extra school, all that they bring, all the alumni, all the fans, the land mass itself, that is good for what we want to do overall. So we're going to bite the bullet to a certain extent. But if the SEC and the Big Ten are just continuing to act autonomously, each one by themselves, then they're going to continue to do what they've done from the beginning. And there is going to continue to be two big motivators for expansion and realignment between those two conferences. The first one is simply reviewing that school, that football program, and saying they bring value or they don't bring value. And for Florida State, for Miami, for Clemson, that's an easy choice. They bring value, take them. For Wake Forest and Boston College, it's an easy choice. They don't bring value, we don't want them. Then there's these schools in the middle. That's going to drive realignment as it did from the very beginning. The SEC took on Oklahoma and Texas because they brought value. The Big Ten brought on USC and UCLA because they brought value. And UCLA was a very big benefactor in that. And then they later brought on Washington and Oregon because they brought value, especially at a reduced rate. The Big Ten is going to be compensating Washington and Oregon, I believe, at half for a period of time. So that's either going to continue the evaluation, or it's going to be just a punch counter punch, and that weighs into it as well. The SEC punched with Oklahoma and Texas. The Big Ten counter punched. And Washington and Oregon saw what was happening to the Pac-12. They also understood that they had value, and they wanted desperately to be in the Big Ten, and they were willing to take less to be part of the Big Ten. The Rod Farva question: if the Big 12 shared their TV revenue equally back before Nebraska, A&M, and Mizzou left, would we be in this situation? Well, the answer is we will never know. We can take our shots at trying to fill in history. For as much wrong as Major League Baseball has done on the business side for years, this is probably one thing that they kind of do right, and they had to placate to all of their franchises in two ways. They had to placate to these smaller franchises, the Kansas Cities and the Pittsburghs, but they also had to placate to the Yankees and the Dodgers in this way. And this might be the best way to approach that situation going forward for these conferences, would be to say, you know what? We are partners. This is one conference. We are equal members, at least on paper and theoretically, we are equal members. Therefore, we're going to take this bulk of the revenue and split it evenly, regardless of who does what, regardless of who's 12-0, who's 0-12, who never goes to a conference championship game, who owns the conference. It's split. This is split. However, there's this over here, and this should be earned. Now, I don't know the finances of the conferences well enough, other than the media rights deals and the things that we know in public, to know where that should be split. But it would only make sense regular season, even though there are certain teams and schools that obviously drive all those ratings that earn all that money, that's a regular season that's played by everyone equally. Therefore, that cut should be the same. It should be distributed equally. Indiana, Rutgers, Illinois get the same as Ohio State, Michigan, USC. But we've got this playoff component that has now become a pretty significant piece of the pie. It was only 5.5 million before. Of course, there were only 3 games. So the Big Ten and the SEC and the other conferences, it was all the same. It was all equal. We're earning $5.5 million before this new contract. Well, that's now 21 million. That has been increased 4 times. And again, some of these numbers don't sound egregiously different until you extrapolate for years and years and years and years and times team and team and team and team, like we just did a few minutes ago. And so that's where I believe you live in both worlds. You show commitment to your conference as being united, as being equal, as everyone having a fair say. But then you also say, we earn this money here because there are certain football programs who excel, and they should be rewarded for that. Therefore, you are, Indiana and Rutgers, going to earn a little bit of playoff money, but you are not going to earn as much as these schools. And you don't predetermine that and say, well, Ohio State's always going to make the playoffs, so we're going to pay them more. No, you let it play out on the field, and you distribute the money differently every year. Which 21 million per team in the Big Ten is 21 times 14 is what, 350? No. Something in that range. 21 times 14. 210, 40. It's about 300 million. So you make some kind of determination that if you don't make the playoffs, you don't make $21 million. You make 10 or 12. And if you make the playoff, you make 40. And if you advance, you make another 5 or 10 or 8. That's how I would do it. I think there's room in a healthy situation to show your commitment to your conference, that everyone's equal, that you're all a team together. But you also say, we're going to reward the teams that succeed. Well, John, when you say can't blame either one of them for wanting the same amount of money as the Big Ten or SEC schools, yes and no. So what I don't blame them for is that their individual schools certainly pull more eyeballs than most teams in the SEC and most teams in the Big Ten. And they've been strong football programs for decades. However, they do play in a conference that did not earn that same amount of money as the Big Ten and the SEC. So again, 2 things can be true at the same time. The ACC brokered a bad deal, but they also are not worth the Big Ten or the SEC. So when we look at that media rights disparity, most of that's justified. A certain percentage of that's justified, that I think is probably around 50%. That the difference between 85 million for the Big Ten and the SEC and 40 million for the ACC, that disparity is partially because the ACC made a bad deal, and it's partially because they're not worth what the other 2 conferences are worth. The further this goes down the road of the NFL, the more this would solve everything. Is that the conferences are not their own. The conferences all unite. And if you truly want to make it the NFL, and I don't think this is in a bad way, I think a lot of the things that we're being faced with, transfer portal, NIL, possibly paying players outright, going the way of professional football, is bad for the sport. That doesn't mean I don't think the player should be paid, but it's bad for the sport and the sport's health. This is one way that this would be good for the sport. to not be fractured in these conferences, but to unite. And then you build a system in which you say, you take the same model that I just applied to each conference, and you apply it to everyone and say, college football makes $1 billion every year, just to use a very rough round number that I can't relate to. $1 billion per year. Okay. 500 million of that is going to be equally divided between our remaining three conferences, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the SEC. Let's just say those are the three left standing. And they each have 16 schools of 48 total teams. And we generate $1 billion in revenue, and each one is going to get 333.3 million. Okay. No, I'm sorry. 500 million out of the billion is distributed equally. So that's about 167 million per conference for that slice of the pie. But the other, we're going to put together a formula that is going to reward results on the field, and it's going to reward who brings in the best television ratings. And that other 500 million is going to be distributed between the conferences based on contribution, production, execution on the field, execution in media. And then it would be up to those conferences. They still run their own conference, but they work together. I'm liking this more and more as I envision it, that they can deal with their own schools. And if there needs to be a redistribution of that money, like we just talked about a few minutes ago, then we certainly could do it that way. Mike G, bringing back bad memories of legends and leaders. Clemson better move quick, or Florida State and Notre Dame will win the Big Ten musical chairs battle. I would think that Florida State would have a bit of a lead against Clemson in that regard as well, for these reasons. To me, Florida State's a better commodity than Clemson because it's in Florida. And if I'm the Big Ten, I want to do what I've been talking about on here for 6 or 7 years, and that's get into Florida. The Big Ten checks every other box. The only box that they can't check is they don't have enough players. Get into Florida. Get Florida State and Miami. That's what I would do if I was the Big Ten. I'm not saying that I would refuse Clemson, but for me, Notre Dame's the number one choice. And then between Florida State and Miami, 2-3, 3-2, I think they're extremely close. I would favor Florida State. It's obviously a better football product right now, and they've been drawing better numbers, even when they were down a few years ago, than Miami. So Florida State with a slight edge over Miami. But if I'm the Big Ten, I'm going to Florida. And also, those are better schools. And the Big Ten does, regardless of what we think, care about that still. Williams taking all three of those. Oh, I thought maybe Notre Dame was included in his comment. Just Florida State and Clemson. Absolute blockbuster deal for the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten's going to get a fight from the SEC. There you go, Mike. I'm right there with you. Right there with you, sir. Maybe we'll have to do another conference realignment video, but I put one together the other couple weeks ago that I thought was pretty strong, especially from the Big Ten standpoint. A lot of people didn't like it because I included the Big 12. I put 24 teams in each conference. Now, that was a little bit of me dreaming and wanting inclusion. me wanting to include the Wake Forest of the world. That was not a prediction. A lot of people took that as a prediction. That was part prediction, 10 or 20% prediction, but it was mostly just this is what makes sense. And this would be nice if we could do this and include everyone. Sport Mark. Appreciate you being here, Mark. How quickly does this go down? Well, as soon as these kind of moves are made in public, if these were equal partners, if the ACC still had a future and Florida State and Clemson still had a future, which they do, of course, then this would be resolved rather quickly, because this is bad, especially for the ACC. This is horrible PR for the ACC. This is not bad PR. I don't take it from any of you or discussions I have or what I see out there. I don't think this is looking bad at all for the two schools, Florida State and Clemson. It's a bad look for the ACC. It makes them look weak. It makes them look underhanded. It makes them look not trustworthy. So if these were both fairly equal partners that had futures, then it wouldn't go on for long. They would figure something out, because to continue to try to work together, these schools have to work with these conferences on a basically in some way everyday ongoing process. So they want to get away from each other. However, the ACC's alternative is that they're in a weakened state and they become not relevant and maybe completely implode. So they want to hold on to this. They're not going to keep Florida State and Clemson. I think at one point they truly believed that they would, that their grant of rights was, unless they were putting up an incredible smokescreen, and maybe they were, but I think that they truly at one point believed that that grant of rights was indestructible and that they would hang on. But I still thought that it was a short-term play that they had to make, but in the long term, so we're sitting here, let's say it's 2022, 2023, and they've got a grant of rights that runs out in 2036. And even if they can hold these schools and this can't be broken in any such way, well, you're only ensuring that you're going to keep a lot of unhappy members together. And then what's going to happen in 2036? Because you're not going to be able to do anything to make up the gap, the revenue gap in the meantime. Therefore, it's all going to explode in 2036 anyway. So if the ACC had somewhere to go and they were going to be in a good position beyond this breakup here, then I would think that this would be resolved rather quickly. But the ACC wants to hang on for dear life. So this could be a bit ugly. Although Florida State in particular, and I'm sure Clemson as well, they have what's called discovery on the ACC. And that it's proven obvious by the moves that Florida State has made and the ACC has made back and forth that the ACC wants to do everything to avoid discovery, the discovery phase of a lot of secret documents, information being displayed to the public, because it won't be pretty. All right, we got our first call. We got Jackson on the line. Jackson, what's going on?
It's going pretty good, Mark. How you doing this afternoon?
I am doing well. What's the good word?
I gotta say, this news with Clemson filing the lawsuit against the ACC, it's not surprising. It wasn't a matter of if, but when. So I mean, when they saw Florida State wasn't too happy, they were like, we're not happy either." I'm wondering when we're going to see Miami and North Carolina be next. It's not a matter of if, but when for those schools.
Yeah, I don't know if they just go ahead and follow suit and do the exact same thing, or there's going to possibly be a few schools that don't even have to make a move and they just benefit from the moves that are being made by everybody else. So for example, let's say Miami and North Carolina are the next two, and they do the same thing. Well, then if the ACC loses all four, and let's say within 6 months to a year, next off season, they settle out of court and the ACC gets paid $100 million by each one of them or whatever it is. And that's that. And now the ACC is down to 10 teams. And maybe the Louisvilles and NC States of the world are able to kind of capitalize on the ACC imploding and they're able to move on. I don't know. But even by losing these four, it was mentioned in the release of the college football playoff contract that's coming up to be renewed in 2026 that what justifies a conference is 8 teams. So the ACC would still be in play. I don't know how the committee would, not the committee themselves, but the management committee would deal with a very weakened ACC to still give them a college football playoff spot. I don't know. It would be a mess.
It feels like the ACC is going the way of the old Big East. It just feels like that for some reason. Feels similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, at some point, like we're not going to see the ACC die like the Pac-12 or the Southwest Conference or the Big East. It just feels like they're going to have to snatch teams from the American Athletic Conference and the Mount West just to survive. And there's going to be people that say, "No way, Boise State's going to the ACC. There's no way you're going to see a San Diego State." Well, we saw Cal Stanford joining the ACC. So, I mean, anything can happen in this crazy world of college football.
And that was the ACC basically just gearing up for this. This was the ACC saying, we got to go the route of the Big 12 and just try to save ourselves by adding as much as we possibly can. Because we're going to be losing our best schools, but we just want to add numbers to kind of refortify ourselves.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I bet you West Virginia is pretty much having a good laugh. Like, especially when the ACC rejected them in 2011, they're probably just having a drink somewhere, just having a good laugh about it. They're just having the last laugh.
I know it. Yeah, West Virginia could have been part of the ACC. I don't know what went wrong there exactly. They would have had a nice backyard brawl game every year with Pitt within the conference. And then, of course, Virginia Tech and West Virginia are longtime rivals from way back. That would have been nice.
I just can't help but wonder what this means for the Boston Colleges of the world and the Wake Forest of the world and the Syracuses of the world. Because, I mean, we saw Boston College. You thought losing Jeff Hafley to a coordinator job in the NFL was bad. I think this is going to be much worse. I think Coach Hafley saw something like this happening. Like he may not say so publicly, but I'm thinking this crossed his mind. He's thinking, I'm out of here, man.
Yeah. Yeah. That may be a bit of a different issue, but to your point, these college coaches certainly, I don't think they care for the turmoil that's in their sport.
Yeah, they're just getting out of there. Well, I'm gonna go head off and I'm just gonna double check my brackets. But before I go, I'm gonna tell everyone if you love something, a little something special in your Easter basket, check out the merchandise store right here at the Voice of College Football. And if you love top-notch college football expertise, go on patreon.com/MarkRogersTV or become a YouTube member of the Voice of College Football.
Love it. Jackson, we appreciate you being here, man.
Oh, thank you for having me on. And it's getting closer to Easter. The Easter Beagle's coming near.
All right. Josh, we'll get to you in 2 seconds. Maybe I shouldn't pay this any attention, but I will because it is ridiculous. So we got our buddy Michael here, who I'm going to give Michael a ton of credit here. And I'm going to assume that he truly doesn't believe what he says. And I'm not just talking about here. I'm talking about like 87 times a day on various social media platforms that Michael writes things that he truly can't believe. I'm going to believe that Michael's smarter than this. I'm going to choose that he is just the ultimate troll and that he's smarter than this. Didn't Clemson beat Ohio State in the playoffs 31-0, but the ACC is irrelevant and nobody is there? Well, nobody said that the ACC was irrelevant. If they lose a few of these programs, which they are about to, then they will be basically irrelevant, depending on how you phrase that. Nationally irrelevant? Yes, they will be irrelevant. To Boston College and Wake Forest fans, they will not be irrelevant. And didn't Cincinnati from the group of five beat Notre Dame to go to the playoffs? We can go on. And doesn't Ohio State crush Notre Dame every time they play? All right. Welcome in. We got Josh on the line. Josh, what's going on?
Not much, man. How you doing, Mark?
I'm good. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, no problem, man. I'm a real big Florida State fan, and I noticed that Clemson made the lawsuit and stuff as well. So that made me a little happy to see that.
Yeah, so they're jumping in the fray with you.
Yeah, I'm really hoping to see Florida State go to the Big Ten, because I honestly think if we get in the Big Ten, it would just mean more. Because if we go to the SEC, what I think winds up happening there is that we're just another big brand in the South, versus if we go to the Big Ten, we are the brand from the South.
It's a good point. It's a great point, because when all of this started to fall apart several years ago, it only makes sense if Florida State looks like an SEC school, obviously, because they've got more series with the SEC schools and they're in Florida. That's obvious. But yeah, that's a great point. Florida State would just kind of blend in to all those other schools that are surrounding them: Auburn, Georgia, on and on and on, Florida, as opposed to being, yes, we're down here in Florida as a Big Ten school by ourselves. Yeah, I think it would make them stand out.
Yeah, and it would almost seem like we're doing like Bowden did back in the '80s, to where we would travel anywhere to play anybody.
Yeah, he sure did. He sure did. I always thought it was a good move for the Big Ten. I've said this for years, to go to Florida and get Florida State and Miami, because really that's the only thing that, and now that they've gone to Southern California and have gone to New York and the East Coast 10 years ago, then why not? Especially since the Big Ten has everything in the world going for it. Everything checks every box, except there's not enough football players.
Yep.
And Ohio State can go to Florida and get players, but after them, Michigan a little, Penn State a little. The other schools are going down there for very third and fourth rate players.
Right.
But if Florida State and Miami were in the Big Ten, and the Big Ten was like, okay, well, we have schools in Florida, I think that other schools could go down there with a lot more authority and grab some players.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and it would help the Big Ten. It would help the Big Ten overall in branding, and to be able to try to overtake the SEC as the premier college football conference too.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one to see play out right now. But I got to think, if the Big Ten gets anyone else, that they've got a good chance of taking that position over.
Oh yeah.
It could be Notre Dame and Florida State together.
Yeah, that would be a good combination.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Josh, anything else?
That's it, man.
I appreciate you calling.
No problem.
Have yourself a good day.
Yeah. You too.
Josh is happy about Florida State possibly moving to the Big Ten. I never thought I would hear as many Florida State fans that are wanting the Big Ten over the SEC than what we hear. Every time I take a poll, it slightly leans to the Big Ten over the SEC. And I think Josh brings up a great point about Florida State just kind of being another SEC team while they would be something special in the Big Ten. That would be a destination game. It wouldn't even matter how good Florida State was, and we would expect them to be good, but that would be a destination game. Looks like some people in the chat are raising an eyebrow and taking exception to me saying Ohio State crushes Notre Dame. Okay. All right. I misspoke. The overall record, series record I meant is they have crushed Notre Dame. It's what? 6-0. Yes, it's 6-0 since 1996. They are crushing them. I didn't mean that every game they crushed them. Obviously, this last game was a flip of the coin. Either team could have won the game. See, I can say that because I speak the truth. Some people stay in this lane of, as long as my team won the game, then I can say anything. I can say, we killed you, we crushed you, we dominated, you're a joke. No, anybody who watched that game or knows anything of that game between those two teams last year knows that coin flip. Okay. We've got number one fan of the U. Oh, nice. Good to have a Miami fan here at the Voice of College Football, of course. We do our Wednesday night show with Cam Underwood from State of the U on the Miami channel each and every Wednesday night, 7 o'clock Eastern time. Okay. Not fan of the U says, ESPN keeps screwing the ACC teams. What are the odds that all the teams choose to avoid the SEC to stick it to ESPN, ABC, Disney? And do what? That's a great thought, but where are they going? And the ACC has a partnership with ESPN. They have a network that was built by ESPN. I have to think that this might be, I'm just taking a guess here. This is an educated guess, though. It's a shot in the dark to a certain extent, but it's an educated guess. That some of the bad blood between ESPN and the ACC started when ESPN launched the ACC network. If we go back 4 to 5 years before that, in 2014, the ESPN launched the SEC network that was highly successful, over the top success, historic success, in that the SEC network on day one, and I had very little contribution in the deal, certainly. I just worked at ESPN, but I was standing in the master control room when the network launched. That the ESPN did a remarkable job at marketing the SEC network, at building relationships with and partnering with cable companies across the spectrum to ensure that the SEC network was successful. So it launched to as many homes as ESPN2 had over at that time, 25-year history, which is incredible if you think about it. The SEC network didn't build up to anything. It was in 95 million homes from day one. 4 to 5 years later, ESPN embarks on the same process, on the same mission with the ACC. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but I don't know what went wrong. I don't know if there wasn't enough clout put into it. That maybe ESPN was a little fat and happy, and maybe they took some things for granted and thought, we just launched this SEC network 4 or 5 years ago to 95 million homes. Everybody's going to take the ACC network. We don't have to do much work. We're just going to throw it out there and let you know, hey, Comcast, you're taking our ACC network, of course. So-and-so, you're taking it. I don't know. I don't know what happened, but the ACC network launch and subsequent success doesn't come anywhere close to the SEC network. And I got to think that the ACC, powers that be, if they have any pride, are not happy about that. And all you have to do is watch the two networks. If you have any eye for television, and there's no comparison between the production quality and the talent that was distributed to the SEC network versus the ACC network. Not even close. And again, I am not privy to the conversations to know what the history is in regards to why that happened, but it just hit me as we were going through that could be, it is human nature. Even at that level, it is human nature that if you have succeeded at something, that if you're not careful, if you're not diligent, that you'll think, this is the same thing. I can nail this again. It's easy. Don't have to put the same type of focus and attention and work detail into it. It's just going to happen. But it didn't. And I don't know what those numbers are now. I don't know what those numbers are now. Thank you for the contribution there, sir. And as Adrian Fleming mentions there, I don't want to say that the ACC network production quality sucks. Not at all. I know people that work there that do a phenomenal job, but they just didn't put the same money and resources into studios and game broadcasts, and again, didn't direct always the best talent. No. However, let's understand that the Big Ten network has not been the greatest. It's improved through the years based on my perspective, which I don't consider to be any more important than anybody else's perspective, because we've all watched TV our whole lives. And so we all have our various touch points on what we consider to be good television. I would say at its finest that, and I don't partake of these networks nearly as much as I once did, but I would say that the SEC network, top shelf, almost like tuning into ESPN. And again, I haven't watched anything on ESPN since probably I left, besides games. But I can't imagine that ESPN is not doing the same quality work that it always did. Now, I may not agree with their commentators and their approach, but in terms of production quality, the SEC network was almost like watching ESPN. The Big Ten, it's good, looks good, looks fine. It's not, say what you will about ESPN, but from maybe it's gone into the tank journalistically and in other ways, but when it comes to putting on a show, it's tough to beat. But I would say that the Big Ten network has been better than, and certainly it continues to grow and become a better product, is better than the ACC network. ESPN let down the ACC network launch. Did not nail it at all. We'll give them a D+, C- just because I want to be a little bit more kind. C- for ESPN launching the ACC network. So that's my long-winded response to whomever made the comment about bad blood between the ACC and ESPN. I've got to think that that was most of it right there. I am not going to get sucked into a bunch of Notre Dame talk as much as I kind of want to be. See Jason here. I respect Jason's opinion. He believes that the Big Ten is a better network than the SEC network, and that the ACC network looks like a high school station. That's a bit of a stretch, but I get your point. What I got to say that blew me away in working with these people is that the college television programs at these universities, and many of them are in the SEC, are extraordinary. And with ESPN partnering with the ACC and most notably the SEC on these college productions, so understand that when you see a football game on the SEC network, it's being done by professionals across the board. When you see a basketball game, I don't know what their approach is there. It's been 3.5 years since I've been there, but depending on the level of basketball game, it could be put in the hands of students to some degree. And then the soccer, the gymnastics, all that stuff. The director's a student, the producer's it's a student-run production. Even on the SEC network, on the ESPNU network. But these television production operations that these colleges and universities run these days, we hired people right out of SEC schools in particular, not just SEC schools, but that was a large portion of it. There was a thrust toward going to the South and recruiting out of SEC schools at ESPN. It was extraordinary what they knew, what their experience level. You could hire a 22-year-old out of LSU, and they had already worked 50 sporting events as a director, camera hand, fill in the blank, video operator, and knew the equipment, knew the production, back and forth. Please join the show if you would like to talk college football. We've left the link there in the chat once again. We are simulcasting on the main channel and also on the Clemson channel. If you join us on the Clemson channel, you get 2 big content deliveries from us each and every week. Of course, you got Jordan Bowman and Tiger Paw Craven with the Clemson All-In Show every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And then you also see the segments that I produce with Jason Priester from allclemsontigers.com. Appreciate Jason getting together with us each and every week to talk Clemson football. And join us on the main channel. And likewise, if you're on the main channel, you're unaware that we've got a Clemson channel, please check it out. All right, welcome into the Voice of College Football. Keith's on the line.
Hey, Mark, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Keith. What's going on?
Oh, I've got an idea I think nobody ever thought of, and that would be instead of Florida State paying $250 to $300 million to get out of the ACC, why don't they and Clemson and maybe a couple other schools want to get out, all just put 50 to 75 million into the kitty and entice 4 other schools to jump out of the conference at the same time, and then doesn't the whole conference dissolve?
Yes, if the conference goes below 8, it dissolves.
So they could get out a lot cheaper and quicker if they just threw some money to some on the fence schools. I don't know who those would be, but the ACC's dying. Maybe that's the easy way out.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that I don't know if that's legal. I'm not saying that it's not legal. It doesn't sound ethical.
Yeah.
So that's my first question that I can't completely answer, but I've got a question about. And then the second one would be, once you get past 4 schools, Clemson, Miami, Florida State, and North Carolina, I don't know that anyone can guarantee that any of those other schools can get into the SEC or the Big Ten. So you are paying them to take some kind of risk. They would want to guarantee that they've got a landing spot.
I can see that. Yeah, it's not the most ethical thing. I admit that. Yeah. The other question I have is, why does the ACC need $350 million from one school? What do they do with $350 million? Split it equally among the board members?
Why does any conference need the amount of money that it takes in from media rights and such?
To distribute to their member schools most of the time.
Sure.
So they want Florida State to pay the other schools to leave, is what you're saying.
Well, what I'm saying is I'm only going by what the grant of rights says. And that's, if I understand it correctly, and I believe I do, it's been talked about forever, is that, and understand that from the first time I heard this, I never thought that the ACC would get away with it. But apparently they had 14 schools sign off on a clause that said, if you leave early, you have to pay us $30 million exit fee, plus the media rights to all home games that you would have played as an ACC member that you will be playing as a member of another conference. That's where they come up with that figure. And for Florida State, at last look, it was $572 million.
Right. I saw a notification that Clemson's exit would only be like $140 million, and yet Florida State was facing $540 million. Does that sound right?
Well, no, it doesn't sound right. But I think that is Clemson, for whatever reason. The reporter was, and I was reading from the Pete Thamel article on ESPN, was just citing that's the exit fee, $140 for both of them. But
okay, so
was not
Clemson
tacking on the media rights aspect of that, because Clemson directly challenged that as this is unenforceable and unconscionable were the terms they were using.
Yeah. Well, that's good. All right. I wanted to congratulate you on your predictive capability for last year, and when you ranked Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia, and Alabama as the 4 best teams in college football. And to me, it looked like that was dead on at the end of the year.
Yeah, I missed them going to the playoffs, but they may have been the 4 best teams. I certainly would line those 4 up last year against anyone else.
Yes. Although I believe you had Michigan a distant 4th for the Natty, and you picked your boys, Ohio State, for number 1. I think you missed the bubble there.
Well, I did. Maybe if I could have gotten one more 30-yard completion, that would have turned the trick. But I'm not here every offseason picking Ohio State to win the national championship. I hadn't done that in about 7 years.
I know you haven't, but are you headed there this year again?
Well, this is going to be the year that a lot of people are going to pick them to win the national championship. You have to understand, Keith, and I'm sure you do appreciate this, that I have a difficult time with making predictions involving my own team, especially since they're as good as they are. if they were if I was a Wake Forest fan, then I'd be able to just, I think I would objectively just say, yeah, they're going to go 6-6 this year. They're not a player in this. But Ohio State's so close. They're one of 3 or 4 programs that I can always see them winning a national championship. It's always conceivable, but that doesn't mean I should predict it.
Yes, I think that's the fate a lot of your coaches suffer. They say if they have 5, 10, 15 years and they only win one or no championships, they think that coach has been a failure.
Yeah, that is the determination.
Yeah. So that's good. And I'll leave with one final point is the at one point, about 5, maybe 7 years ago, Nick Saban was on a remarkable run where every 5-star he ever recruited was drafted in the first round. And that string was broken about 5 years ago. And now 5-stars aren't 100% of the time. And I think NIL and pay to play is hurting this, because in the days before NIL pay to play, the money most of the time went to the parents. The parents got the houses and the cars, and the kids played football. But today, the kids get most of the money, getting most or all the money. And you know what happens to most famous kids that become millionaires as teenagers?
What happens to them?
Yeah,
It doesn't work out well.
it
They
doesn't
become
work out
drug
well.
addicts. They waste
Yeah.
away money.
Yep. And I think we see that happening in college football.
Yeah, the only difference I would say there, Keith, and I get your point, I believe I do, is that at least these athletes, at least they have to work. There is a work ethic there. They have to lift weights, they have to watch film, they have to practice, they have to go to practice, go to meetings, they have to travel, be on time. So there is a work ethic there, as opposed to I'm a multimillionaire and I just throw my 18-year-old a car and a bunch of stuff. And sure, that might be thrown at the athlete as well, but they still have to work.
Yes, but both Ohio State and Bama, I think both had 15 plus 5-stars on their teams last year, right?
Something in that range. Yeah.
Something close
Yep.
to or over. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How many of those 5-stars played up to their 5-star level on both Ohio
Whoa.
State and Bama?
Very few.
Very few. And that's what I'm saying is this money might be corrupting these kids. So even though they're there and they're showing up for all the games, but are they giving it their best effort? Or are they worried about the bling and the chicks and all the other stuff that come with fame and money?
Well, we can also understand, Keith, that while 5-stars are the most likely by far of all the star rankings to reach the NFL, it's still only about a 40 to 45% proposition that any 5-star will reach the NFL.
Yes, but in the past, Saban has been able to get in every single one of them.
I understand that.
Yes. And so what was
I'm
Saban
saying by
doing
and large, the statistics, the last statistics I looked at, it was a 40 to 45% possibility that a 5-star makes the NFL. That's what the percentage is. That means that we expect a 5-star to be an NFL player someday. Shoot, there are 3-stars playing all over the place in the NFL. So we expect 5-stars to make the NFL. That's one of the reasons they're called 5-stars. That's one of the reasons why there are roughly 32 positions as 5-stars. They're projecting them to be first-round picks in the NFL draft if they reach their potential. So for them not to reach the NFL at all says quite a bit, but it's still a less than 50-50 proposition, even before NIL.
Yes, and we've even seen that at Michigan. Half of our 5-stars didn't play like 5-stars. Yes. All right, I'll segue you back onto conference alignment, and I'll leave you with this question: how many teams can a conference grow to before they have to go back to divisions? Because the Big Ten is at 16 this year.
18.
18. Oh, okay. We're up to 18, and we're not going to have divisions. If we pick up 2, 4, 6 schools in the next couple of years, I mean, how big are we going to get before we have to go to divisions?
Not much bigger, because even though I'm sure that the conference schedule is built in such a way to avoid teams tying for a conference championship that did not play. And of course, it's not the end of the world if you have 2 teams that finished first and second and they didn't play. And if they're the clear 1 and 2, then they just simply play in the conference championship game. But anything beyond that can become a little messy, and it's going to happen. There are going to be 3 teams tie for second place who didn't play, let's say.
Right.
And there has to be a tiebreaker enforced, so one goes to the conference championship game.
Right. Well, good. Thanks for having me, Mark. It was good talking to you.
I appreciate it, Keith. Have a good day.
All right.
All right. Our banner here says sponsor the voice of college football. What we mean there is that if you're connected to a business, own a business, or if you're just own personal brand, you can partner with us here at the Voice of College Football. We can do a lot of good for you. We would love to partner with you. Please hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. All sorts of good stuff here in the chat. Yes, the Rod Farva. So when you hit people with the statistic that 40 to 45% of 5-stars make the NFL, sometimes the initial response is, well, they must be underachieving. There are way too many that are busts. Well, the 4-star number is like 12 or 13%. And the 3-star number is like 3 or 4%. So the recruiting analysts do a really good job. Ohio State wide receivers hype every day. How many top 10 NFL receivers are in the NFL performing? Well, Chris Olave is a star. And of course, oh man, am I already Garrett Wilson? He's a star. Michael Thomas is a star. I know he got hurt and he's been hurt, but Michael Thomas caught more passes than anybody in the history of the NFL for his first 3 seasons. Okay. We have got some arguments going on there in the chat. Okay, null nonsense. That's not true, Mark. Every 5-star Saban has not been a first-round pick. Okay, I didn't state it. So the caller, Keith, was stating that up until a certain time, that every Saban 5-star was a first-round pick. I don't know that even that is true. We would have to go through Nick Saban's each class. Even if we just go to 2008, his first class at Alabama, which was a great class. And we look at the 5 stars. Well, can't look at the 5 stars. Everything's NA, 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 NA on 247. I tried. Yeah. I would think that fact is concerning being drafted, period. I can't imagine that every 5-star was a first rounder. I don't think that's the case. I would think that every 5-star for a long period of time was drafted. Because that means if Alabama signs usually 5 or 6 5-stars every year, then every year they would have 5 or 6 5-stars in the first round of the NFL draft. And of course, we know that hasn't happened. That's impossible. That's not happening because they're not having 5 or 6 players in the first round of the NFL draft. Number one. Number two, not all those players are 5-stars. So maybe Keith misspoke and he meant they were all drafted up until a certain point. Jimmy's here. ACC is dead in the water. Florida State, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina, NC State, and Notre Dame to the Big Ten. Well, Notre Dame is not a member of the ACC, but we get your point, Jimmy. All right, folks, we have done yeoman's work here for 90 minutes. We appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And nice crowd on hand joining us on the Clemson channel. Clemson folks that join us on a regular basis on the Clemson channel. Understand we've got a national channel and vice versa, folks. If you join us on the national channel on a regular basis, we've got a Clemson channel and we've got our Clemson All-In show with Tiger Paw Craven and Jordan Bowman each Thursday night at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Thanks so much for being here. Our next show is the Iowa Hawkeyes live show with Corey Bratta at 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central over on the Iowa channel. We also have Nebraska live tonight, Michigan live tonight, but it starts with Iowa Hawkeyes live at 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central over on the Hawkeyes channel. Thanks for being here. You guys are the best, and we will see you soon. Most of us are on the internet pretty much all the time. It's fun. You get to socialize, you get entertained, and in this day and age, it's pretty much necessary. And even if you're one of those people that's not on the internet all the time, you know what is? Your personal information. And there are people out there trying to hack you all the time. They want your email address, they want your phone number, they want your place of employment, and they want to do bad things with it. There's also fairly legitimate corporations and companies that want your information. They want it for marketing purposes. They're going to buy it. They're going to sell it. They're going to trade it. At the very least, it's annoying to you. It's a nuisance. It's aggravating. Your email gets cluttered up with spam email. You get robocalls all the time. That's at the very least. At the worst, it's a threat to your family, to your friends, to your personal information, to your banking, to your finances, to your security, to your safety, to your identity. It can be pretty serious. This video is sponsored by Aura. I got hacked and it was pretty obvious. This was about 8 or 9 months ago and there were red flags all over the place. And I didn't exactly know what to do, but I knew I needed to do something quickly. I mean quickly. I researched 8, 10, or 12 companies immediately. I went all over the place. I asked people. I was online looking for the best company that could serve my needs and secure my information. You know who I found? Aura. And I'm glad I did. It was amazing. I contacted them. They got right back to me immediately. Their customer support is phenomenal. Their customer service is first-rate, friendly. They are detailed. They know what they're doing, and they do it right, and they will protect you. In addition to everything I just mentioned, they've got a password keeping service. They keep your credit score. They notify you anytime there's a possible data breach. This has happened to me a number of times. I'm getting notifications all the time when there's a possible compromise to my credit score or anything that I don't want. They've got a VPN that will allow you to browse the internet anonymously. It's amazing. And again, customer service support available 24/7. Click the link in the description section below and get 2 free weeks of Aura. Protect your finances, protect your information, protect your privacy, protect your identity. I did, and I'm glad I did. Aura, thank you so much for what you've done for me, and now for my Voice of College Football community.